Well, the title today is, are your problems what you believe them to be? Can they be solved without solving them? So before I start this talk, I want to give another disclaimer, which I do many times. The disclaimer is if you've come to non-duality, from self-help and because your life is in a crisis and you're wanting to fix relationships, or you're wanting to fix your current situation, you're feeling depressed, and you think that this will help, then this might not be for you. Non-duality is a really radical subject. It's really giving up one's will back to God. It's spirituality. It's like full on. It's not therapy. It's not healing your personal situation in your life. It's like the destruction of everything, like the destruction of you and the way you see the world until you're left with nothing. So you're giving everything back to the divine. So this is really a loss program. It's not for self-help. It's not for fixing yourself. It's not to try and make your life better because you've got difficult situation. And if you don't want to do therapy, because deep down you feel ashamed about doing therapy, so you think you'll get into spirituality to make it better, then this isn't the place for you. It's really full-on death of self, which is absolute surrender to God and God's will, living without somebody that's here orientating anymore. And it's a complete energetic shift, and it radically changes the life. Like in non-duality, we don't talk too much about the effects it has on the person because it's different for everyone, but it radically changes everything. To go from somebody experiencing inside the body to nobody experiencing. That nobody is looking out now. And that's not intellectual. That's not something you get. It's not a doctrine, like it's not a philosophy that you take on board. It's an actual experience that in this moment, there is nothing looking out of the eyes. And it's not just an understanding of it. It's a movement to that looking, to nothingness looking out. And I really say this with so much love and compassion because I see non-duality being criticized so much on the internet now for, in a way, causing problems with therapy or something. Like that it's not, it's problematic in terms of therapy because it clashes with therapy or people use it as therapy. And non-duality teachers should be this or should be that. But I think people are forgetting, what non-duality is and the origins of non-duality. Like non-duality is spirituality in the end. And it's not a therapy. It's not here to fix you. It's to go beyond the you. Yeah. So I hope that puts off the right people and keeps the right people turned on. In a way, that's a ridiculous comment because it's perfectly in line with God's will. There's nothing out of line. Okay, having said the disclaimer, I will begin with the title. So, are your problems what you believe them to be? Can they be solved without solving them? So, what is it that you believe is your problem now? So I've just said all this, by this disclaimer. And then I have a title like this, which talks about personal problems. But whatever you believe your problem to be isn't your problem. The problem of all of humanity and society is not being in line with God's will or with life's will or the divine's will. and fighting against that. So right now, every action is coming from the divine. And the person isn't in surrender to that. The person is fighting that. But if the person wants to remain in that game, then that's what they should do. You know, if they want to remain a person with a good life, then that's where they should go. They shouldn't go here, because this is talking about the end of the person. But if there is still an interest, then we can explore this. That all suffering arises from the belief that this life is your will. That you are speaking, you are breathing, you are looking, you are hearing, and you are seeing. And non-duality points to there is nobody looking, hearing, and seeing, and this is the freedom. So whatever problem you believe you have isn't actually the ultimate problem. The ultimate problem is not being in line with your truth, which is the emptiness, or the empty looking, and the sense of existence. However, this isn't for everybody, and some people need to play that game for that whole lifetime, their whole lifetime of fixing their problems, and that's what's best for them. But there's some that begin to learn or begin to see that fixing the problems isn't actually what's wanted. Fixing the problems can help, but more problems arise. You know, this life is in constant change, so you're never going to be able to make your life permanent. So it creates no more problems for you. So to be in total peace and harmony with life has to be a recognition of the truth and a movement to the truth. That everything is life's will. There is nobody speaking, there is nobody hearing, there is nobody seeing, there is nobody feeling. Only God is. And it's illusory. You're in a waking dream, believing that you are orchestrating your life. There hasn't actually been an examining of experiencing. There has just been an investment in belief systems. So you is a belief, your life is a belief, your problems are a belief, your future is a belief, and your past is a belief. Everything is a belief arising now, and then this attachment comes and sees these beliefs arising, these ideas arising, and takes them to be truth. So the idea that you're sitting in a room is seemingly relatively true. You're sitting in a room, maybe some of you are sitting outside. That's seemingly relatively true, but it's still a belief. You are imagining that. In actuality, there is experiencing happening for nobody, by nobody, in nothing. That's the actuality. And the realization of this is absolute freedom. It's what we call love. Not love as in opposed to having other ideas, or love opposed to hate. It's love as in divinity, knowing thyself, absolute at homeness. You know, if you're feeling relief because of other ideas being released, you know, that you are a doer, or that all life is your responsibility, that's not what's being talked about. It's not a relief from old beliefs. This isn't a dogma. This is pointing to an actuality, an experience in this moment, not a thought in this moment, an experience of emptiness. But it's so hard to hear because the mind is so much in the way. It's like, I am looking out of the eyes. Who is looking out of the eyes? Who is looking out of the eyes? Only God. Only God is creating the thoughts, is creating the feelings, is watching, is hearing. The person has never been alive. The person has never known anything, been anything, had anything, owned anything, interacted with anyone. It's a system playing like an AI in the phone. And humans believe so much in it that they're running around like headless chickens trying to create that as their reality. This is real. I am real. My life is real. And then there's so much hatred and dislike towards non-duality now because it's seen as depersonalization or unhealthy psychologically. Yes, if you take this on as a belief, that is unhealthy psychologically. But in order to express this, it has to be expressed through words. But it's not the words that is it. So if you're taking on these words, you're missing the point. Who is watching the words? The words are the dream, the words are the illusion. Anything that's appearing is the illusion. What is it that's experiencing everything? And it's really an inward investigation. Like, I can't give it to you. Like there's this blame of non-duality teachers not explaining it properly or going too much into therapy or traumatizing people by talking about all these depersonalization beliefs. But what we're trying to suggest is what is looking, and this is your own investigation, and it's the most profound thing that can ever be expressed. It's so sad that people are trying to dampen it out. I think it's good that people have caution, but why would one want to dampen that out? Nobody else speaks about this in society. Everybody is validating each other's dream. Everybody is validating the illusion. It's so rare that the illusion is shown for what it is, an illusion. You are not real. You do not exist. I do not exist. So who exists? And this is where it has to be a true, honest investigation. This isn't about a narcissistic defense of you becoming better than your neighbors by knowing you're an illusion or becoming enlightened and being better than everyone else. It's an investigation into who's experiencing this. Who is experiencing this? What is experiencing this? And there's a big difference between an intellectual understanding of no self to actual experiential, the experience, no, to the actual shift where nothing is looking. It is radical to be sitting here and have no back or front, to have no inside or outside. It's not theoretical, it's actual. And in that, there is absolute love. But the love is not attached to anything. The love is like the best friends with the emptiness. It only arises with the emptiness. And there also can be lots of bliss, but bliss is also something that comes and goes. Love doesn't, but bliss comes and goes in a way because it's an experience. So who is experiencing now? Who is watching now? So the belief in problems is, particularly in the Western world, society's addiction. So in the East, because they've been brought up with such a surrender to God and everything being God's will, there's mostly a different outlook. But in the West, there is such immense psychological suffering because of the conviction of doership, and that you are an independent entity that is separate from all other people, and it's your job to make your life happy. And through the pressures of that, what it does is the mind becomes obsessive and begins to fixate on problems, because it believes it's its job to make itself happy. And there's kind of, like in the West, a bit of a sickness that seems to happen in humanity, because it's passed on this constant addiction to thinking and to the belief in themselves. There is such an individualistic perspective that I am the most important person in the universe and that the world revolves around me, especially now with the progression of social media. And then that me thinks that the reason that it's suffering is because non-duality isn't good enough teaching, and it needs to defend itself about it, and it gets depressed when it gets involved in it. Yeah, it gets depressed if it takes it wrongly. I agree with that. And because in the West, we don't have this foundational idea of everything being God's will, it's crushing for that identity that's had so much pressure put onto it. The most important thing is you and your life, and you got to make yourself happy. Whereas actually, there is simply life expressing itself in every moment, and that is love, that in itself. It's not about you solving your problems, you getting a bigger house, you having a bigger family, you collecting more money, you stopping your mother-in-law doing certain things. All of these things create more pleasure and less pain, and that's perfect to manage them and deal with them and go to psychologists and work out the best way to deal with these situations and get life advice. But that's not non-duality. The non-duality part is that nothing is your will. Everything is the will of God. And God is the empty looking, which is watching everything, the consciousness. The person has never been conscious. And the more that that surrender happens, that it stops being someone that feels like it's driving the dream bus, the more freedom that entails. So the solving from the non-duality perspective of problems is the recognition of self. That you are not the doer of your action. God is, life is. And this is the most beautiful message that can be heard from my perspective. But then we're like, who is Lisa's perspective? That's the word that's coming out. I say that because speaking to a Western audience that needs that respite. The recognition of everything being God's will, which isn't something that you recognize. It's not something that happens in the dream. It's a movement back to being God, to watching from God's perspective. profoundly changes the person. Profoundly changes the person. Because there's always home. And although there can be multitudinous, how I don't know how to say that word, of feelings that can arise, and then they become very fleeting. You know, if somebody's, yeah, so maybe it's best not to say those things, say absolutes. So if you're having problems in the human world, go to therapy and understand your character better in your thought systems. So to me, there's two areas of healing that tends to happen in waking up. There is the subconscious. So to me, what the subconscious is understanding in every moment the thought processes that are happening. There's layers to it, and maybe there's only a level of depth that can happen, but it's like telling the truth. So when I was younger, before I met my teacher, Roger, I used to get angry, but I thought I was happy. So my thoughts were telling me I was happy, but underneath I was angry. So it would come across in maybe passive aggression or I didn't like maybe a depressive feeling or something. And in my head, I was telling myself I was happy and everything was okay because I couldn't accept that I was angry. You know, I was a woman, I'm not allowed to be angry, to be compliant. So what seems to happen when waking up is there needs to be the recognition of all this shit, like a stopping lying to oneself. So you know, you're not like deceiving yourself, because when you're deceiving yourself, you're really involved in the story. So it's like everything just becomes a lot more simple. You stop pretending you're happy when you're angry, pretending that your problems are because of other people. You know, you stop all this bullshit and just become very perceptive about what's arising. So I love Gangaji, you know, always says you tell the truth. It's like being honest. You're no longer trying to be this presented form that people love. You know, what's more important to you is being true, to yourself. So that's one thing that happens. And then the other thing that happens is balancing out the energetics of the body, like the hormonal system, the nervous system. And a lot of that can be done through the Indian system of like yoga, mantras, bhakti yoga, karma yoga, all these different types of practices. What's the breathing called, the Indian breathing? I've got it on my website. I struggle with words. The breathing exercises and kirtan, bhajan singing, yoga. So all of this, and also Ayurvedic medicine, all of this is helping the body. So there's a seeing through the illusions that the mind is saying, and then a sorting out of the nervous system, because the nervous system has become hyper aroused from all these lies that the body mind has been telling itself, like pretending to be happy when it's furious, pretending to be kind when it hates the other person, exploding in the inappropriate moment because it can't control its emotions. So there is an understanding the thoughts, so stopping lying, stopping presenting this image to others, and then balancing out the nervous system. And that's the Indian system tends not to look so much at the mind, although they do, but more at the body, because maybe in India, you know, they don't get into such like complicated psychology as Westerners do. So these are two things that happen. And they happen because it takes like, you can look at that when the nervous system is all derailed and when the thoughts are all disrailed and chaotic, it's like dense clouds, like dense fog in the eye. It's like it takes up the whole screen. The person is uncomfortable and unhappy, and so it takes up the whole screen. And when that becomes less, there is more space for the true recognition to happen. So that's why in India there is such an emphasis on these practices. But it's not that the practices are going to lead you there, because who would they lead there? They're there to settle down the instrument, so the instrument then doesn't go on the internet complaining about how awful non-duality is because they're suffering so much. Because that person hasn't recognized that they need to settle down the system, and that the belief in non-duality isn't going to alleviate anything. You know, it's a recognition that's got to happen. It's a self-investigation that has to happen. And then satsang, I'm speaking about it from a teacher where there is a recognition of self. It is an energetic exchange. It's jnana yoga, wisdom yoga. So there is the verbal expression that God is the doer. But it's so it's jnana yoga, but it's also, you know, meeting in emptiness. It's where everybody comes together committed to meeting in emptiness, and then there is this energetic resonance that happens. You know, in most places you're always meeting two people, whereas right here we're nobody meeting as nobody, and there is an absolute commitment to that. And the only practice really that's suggested here is the movement of the attention to sense of existence, the I am, or the empty looking. And to keeping the divine in mind at all times. I recommend doing the other things as well, but they're not of my expertise, you know, that they're things that you need to investigate. But I can really see how singing kirtan and bhajangs and you know, doing breath work and yoga and understanding the illusions of the mind and the false ideas that are presented, all of this helps settle down the person. And there's a reference page on my website of loads of different sites that you can go to do that. I recommend that, but that's not what satsang is about. Like, satsang is more the commitment in emptiness to express emptiness. And then the only practices really is to keep putting the personal awareness in personal awareness or in the sense of existence. Yeah. And then keeping this in mind, keeping God in mind in every instant. Yeah, what beauty.